Welcome back to another weekly analysis video. This analysis is for the week of February 15th, 2026. We'll start with a review of last week's price action and then move into the analysis for next week. Alright, so if you recall, I was looking for bearish prices last week, and I believe the close was right here on Friday. February 6th. This is where we closed, and then we had a little slight bit of a gap opening going into Monday, February 9th. Recall that I had said I'd wanted to see price staying here and then go lower, make another run lower, 24,057, and these lows over here within its relative stop run area. It actually went a little bit beyond the upper portion of that range. And remember, I had said I did not want to see it go higher than 25,515. It didn't even reach there, but it got pretty close to it. Stayed below it. And then on Thursday, we started having some expansion to the downside through this area again. Okay. So we had a slight retracement higher into the premium or upper portion of this range, and then now it looks like it may want to drive lower, and we'll discuss more on that and what I expect may happen going into next week for the weekly analysis. But we got some bearishness last week, not what I'd have liked to have seen. I didn't like all the consolidation we had here, but again, this is typical in the type of zone that we're in now. And now we're going into the time of year where we start getting out of the holiday volume, and we start seeing more signatures in price that should hold, and that we should start seeing a really firm bias come into play. Okay, so better price action should be on its way, as long as we get out of this range in here. And seemingly so as of right now, it wants to move to the downside. So we'll monitor that, and we will discuss that going into the analysis for next week. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the hourly chart for the review. All right, now into the hourly chart here. Let's go ahead and move into the open right here, Sunday, February 8th. That's where we opened. Slight gap up. Now recall that we were right here, roughly in the middle of the range before that open. Okay, we were actually in the lower portion, not really in the middle. But we gapped up into that upper portion. Started coming off of it, like so. Came in that lower portion here, and then the Monday, Indice Open, New York Open, we moved higher. Okay, now as we were moving higher, I'm gauging to see how it reacts with its stop run area. The stop run area relative to the 25,515 level, and to see if it wants to actually reach that level. Notice the consolidation above the equilibrium zone, and just crouching below this, and then the expansion away from that consolidation. Okay? It's very important that you understand that the expansion away from the consolidation in conjunction with the time parameters, which again I haven't discussed yet, that'll be later in the year. Once we see that expansion, this displacement away from that, that is our sign that it wants to not only move away from this consolidation, but it wants to leave this zone in here and then target the lower portion of the current range that we are working within, which is between 25,515 and 24,786. So Thursday was the main trade of the week, finally allowing the market allowing itself to move and seeing the lower portion of this range targeted. Nonetheless, it was interesting. We did have some of my analysis come to fruition. Again, it wasn't the bearishness that I'd like to see, but recall what I said. As long as we remained below 25,515 and we move away from it, it should stay either within this range or move out of it to the downside. 25,515 is still a line in the sand. And moving on to the 15-minute chart here, we see a more refined view compared to that of the hourly chart. And notice this block of price action here. Okay, let me go ahead and highlight that. That is that consolidation that I've been speaking about, that we sat in for the majority of the week and then finally moved out of on Thursday. So again, the trade of the week would have been on Thursday, waiting for price to leave this consolidation. And once we start breaking below 25,272, seeing how it reacts to the stop run area below it. Notice how it uses it as inversion. It goes right through it, uses it as inversion, and then repels away. There was another entry in the middle of here. There usually always is on a lower time frame, like a 1-minute chart. And then it expands lower, finally reaching down into 24,786. Okay. It is really nice to see when things pan out the way they should, even though I didn't see the amount of bearishness that I'd like to see, and I wasn't expecting a massive, downslide or anything like that, but I was expecting bearishness. It is nice to see that our parameters that I said price should not go through were respected, and that price then started seeking bearish prices. And I still foresee bearish prices in the future as long as it remains above this area in here and overall remains above below 25,515. So let's go ahead and discuss that. Let's move into the analysis for the week of February 15th, 2026. All right, and back on our daily chart here for the weekly analysis for the week of February 15th, 2026. And as I mentioned before in the review, I am still bearish. So price is currently here, just slightly below 24,786. It needs to ideally remain above the equilibrium portion of this range right here. Okay, that's the middle of that range. It needs to remain above that if we really want to see some nice bearish momentum come into play here. My next objective would be 24,057 and seeing if it wants to reach these lows in here within the stop run area below 24,057. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for, bearish prices at the moment. Now, what would negate my bearish bias? We start trading above this range here and start moving into 25,515. It shouldn't come back here, okay, if it's bearish. Now, if it does do that, then we'll have to revisit other ideas. But for now, I'm going to remain with my bias of being bearish. And we will assess it going into the open for next week. So I'll be seeing how price opens and then seeing how we go into and trade into Monday morning, going into Tuesday, etc. Okay? So let's go ahead and move on to the hourly chart. All right, on to our hourly chart here. I want to note this gap in this area in here. It could very well touch that gap, come into this area, and then repel away. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see just a little bit of this gap closed in. That would be an ideal entry. Not all of it closed in, because then that would be above here. But it can go to the upper portion of here and then get away. I do not want to see all of this displacement or gap closed in. The middle is sufficient. This gap that should remain open, just a little of it being closed in is sufficient. Does not need to close in all the way. Okay. So price pokes its head above 25,029, closing in some of the gap, and then repels away. That is the ideal scenario and situation that I'd like to see unfold. Targeting this low in the 25,057 and into its relative stop run area here. That's what I'd like to see, and that's what I'll be monitoring going into next week. And lastly, onto our 15-minute chart here. Have a more refined view compared to that of the hourly chart. And there's really not much more to discuss as it relates to what I'm expecting for next week. I'm bearish. I'm expecting these gaps that are existing in this zone in here to not fully be closed in. I only want to see the middle of this range be sought after. Don't want to see it go much higher than that. If it does go higher than that, I only want to see it go as high as 25,272. I don't even like that. But it would have to get away from it pretty quickly. Okay? We start going through here and into here, we will have to revisit other ideas and perhaps change our bias. But for now, I'm seeing that it should stay below this area in here, repel away from it if it comes back in that area. Okay? Don't want to see it come above 25,272. So with that being said, that's going to conclude the weekly analysis for the week of December 15th, 2026. Thanks for joining. And as always, take care. And God bless.